And you're listening to Flashpoints on Pacifica Radio. My name is Bernstein. Gilad Atzmon is my guest here, along with Rabbi Michael Lerner. I'm really delighted that you both could join us today.
Pleasure.
And Gilad Atzmon is the author, most recently, of The Wandering Who. Michael Lerner has just published Embracing Israel-Palestine, A Strategy to Heal and Transform the Middle East. And I appreciate, Michael, that you came in at the last minute. Sure. I dragged you in here and made sure that you join us. Let me start this way. I interviewed Gilad on Saturday night at the Cultural Center in I said it wrong, it's the Islamic Cultural Center in Oakland, because the Arts Center run by the city of Oakland, somehow there were all kinds of strange things that happened in the last minute, bureaucracies. It all seemed pretty simple to me, that somebody was sent a check and, you know, maybe it ended up here and got to someplace else a week late. I don't really know. But apparently, they did not, the Alice Arts Center and the Oakland City did not apparently want to go ahead with this. We did have this beautiful interview at the Islamic Cultural Center, but I have to say that in planning to interview Gilad Atzmon, I have gotten more hate mail, more attacks. I've been called a self-hating Jew hater. I've been called a pro-Nazi, a Holocaust denier, as was my guest, Gilad Atzmon. And I think actually you two know each other. Michael, you've been in, you're familiar with the kind of writing that Gilad does. Why do you think I got that kind of attack? Why do you think people are saying those things? Do you think I'm a Jew hater?
Look, I'm not here to give anybody a hechsher, say this one is kosher and that one isn't kosher. I think that the whole discourse of who is kosher and who isn't kosher, or who is okay and isn't okay, is a shanda, is a disgrace. And we need to listen to people, listen to their arguments, listen to their worldviews, and then when we disagree. But I myself have been faced with the same kinds of charges. I've had 4 times in the last year and a half, my house has been physically attacked. I've been plastered with posters saying, you're a Nazi, you're a self-hating Jew, and it's not just me, and it's not just Gilad Atzmon. This is a discourse that pervades a large section of the Jewish world, in which anybody who raises significant questions about Israel gets abused. And unfortunately, I believe that has had the consequence of pushing away many younger Jews who are thinking to themselves, well, if they're telling me I'm not a good Jew because I have ethical questions about Israeli policy, then maybe I'm not a good Jew. And I'm here as a rabbi to say, not true. That in fact the best of the Jewish tradition leads us to challenge established power, and the prophets did this in the Bible. They were always saying that the government of the state was screwed up. They were challenging the priests. They were challenging the religion. So I'm not here to say this is kosher, this is not kosher. I think that we should engage in the ideas, struggle with the ideas, and where people think that they disagree with ideas, then disagree with them. But don't put down the people. Don't make the people into evil people who disagree with you. And I think that the left does this also, by the way, for a lot of people on the right. They don't listen to and respect people on the right, and I think we've got to stop that. We've got to be able to say, we disagree with this person. We even think that the policies they're pursuing are criminal and should be put into jail. But the person isn't fundamentally evil. The person still has a redeeming part to them. So I think that it's a shanda, it's a disgrace when people like Gilad or me or Dennis or anyone else is pushed out of the public discourse by this kind of slander.
All right, Gilad, I want you to come in here. Your new book, The Wandering Who, is about Jewish identity and explores Jewish identity, and you sort of lay out Jewishness, Judaism, and what you call Zionism. Could you talk about that?
Yeah.
Set up that premise, please.
The concept of my book is not very complicated at all. I argue that Israel defines itself as the Jewish state. The Israeli lobby is the strongest political power in America, in Britain, in Canada, in France. Israeli tanks are decorated with Jewish symbols. And these facts alone allows us to ask, what is the connection between Jews, Judaism, Jewishness, Zionism? What is the role of Jewishness? What is the role of Judaism in Jewish life? Now, it is so interesting for me to listen to Rabbi Lerner, because in my book, I don't deal actually with Judaism. As we know, the biggest collective, Jewish collective that support the Palestinians actually are the ultra-Orthodox Jews, Torah Jews. So it is not necessarily Judaism that we have to deal with. Israel is largely a secular state, and we want to understand what is it with Jewish secularism. I believe that something went horribly wrong in the process of Jewish secularism and brought the birth to a very strange identity that is extremely intolerant. Now, Rabbi Lerner made a point about the left. I actually think that there is a very interesting continuum between Jewish secularism and the left. For an Orthodox Jew to be chosen is a burden. Is a moral burden. You have to stand there as an exemplary case of well-behaving. But for a secular Jew, what does it mean to be chosen? That you are born chosen? That you have chicken soup? What makes you into chosen? It's a form of a narcissist, arrogant, exclusive, and sometimes racially oriented exceptionalist view. Now, the left has a very similar principle. They call themselves progressive. What makes you into progressive? You set a beautiful world, a setting that is imbued with exceptionalism. You locate yourself in the middle of it, and then you spit over anyone else, whether it is Christian, Muslim, Rabbi. You would call them reactionary, and you basically don't have to debate with them, to exchange with them. I believe that politics has failed on us. We are living in a post-political era. We are believing in a post-ideological era. The big ideologies failed on us. I think that we must start to look into ethical answers, to learn again how to think ethically. And this is a painful process. But this is the only way out of the doomed situation we are locked in.
I want to let you jump in here. I just forgot to mention that Gilad is also a former Israeli citizen. He served in the Israeli military. He played in the Israeli Air Force, and then left the country for Great Britain. So just so people understand that,
Yes.
Michael.
Well, one thing I want to say is, I have a congregation here in Berkeley. It's called Beit Tikkun, BEYT. TIKKUN.org. You can find it on the web, Beit Tikkun. And we have eliminated all that chosenness language from our prayers. Because we also agree, we agree that concept, which I think made a great deal of sense at a time when Jews were historically oppressed, it functioned in the same way that black is beautiful, or that women are the
positive discrimination.
In other words, it helped people psychologically overcome the fact that our actual day-to-day reality was one of not just powerlessness, but of being treated as though we were the scum of the earth and the most disgusting beings on the planet. However, what's happened is that in the 20th century, after the Holocaust, Jews got power in Israel and in the United States. And here, the language of chosenness becomes something very different, because it means it means that we are now entitled to pay attention only to our needs and not to others' needs. And I think that this is the great danger of any religious or any nationalist tradition, and even at times of the left. That is the sense that we are the ones who have all the answers, that we are the path to salvation.
For sure.
But on the other hand, let me say that I do believe that many secular people on the left are motivated by strong moral sense.
Indeed.
It's not just some of my best friends. I actually found more of the of ethical sensitivity in sections of the left than I found at times in sections of the Jewish community. But what I've come to understand now is that Jews, Christians, Muslims, Hindus, Buddhists, and secular humanists, and whatever, we all have a struggle going on between two voices, between one voice in our head that says the only possibility is for domination and control because everybody's going to dominate or control us unless we dominate and control them, and on the other voice that says no, that our safety and our security can come through generosity, caring for the other, love for the other, and policies that reflect that generosity and caring, what we call in our network of spiritual progressives, which, by the way, we emphasize is also open to atheists and secular humanists and agnostics and whatever. You don't have to. Spiritual means for us that you're open to recognizing the importance of love, caring, kindness, and generosity. In other words, that the ethical dimension is critical. And so in this work, we are challenging those inside every religion and outside every religion, in the Marxist world, in the psychoanalytic world, who think domination and power is really the way, and we are aligned with. In other words, I'm closer to some of my Christian or Muslim or Buddhist or Hindu or secular humanist friends than I am to some of my more Orthodox or religious friends in the Jewish world, because they believe in domination, and I believe in love and kindness and generosity. And that is the bottom line is what's when you look at the world, is it a world based on power over, or is it a world that can be based on love, kindness, and generosity? And that's what Network of Spiritual Progressives is about.
All right, Gilad, why don't you talk a little bit about some of the more controversial things? Rabbi Lerner is a very strong supporter of the State of Israel. That would be correct, right?
I'm a supporter of the State of Israel, right, but I hate what its policies are. I'm in the same sense that I'm a supporter of America, but I have been put in jail in America. I was one of the Seattle Seven put into prison for my opposition to the war in Vietnam. I am very much the supporter of America, strong supporter.
But you're not a supporter of Israeli planes marked with the star, marked with the Israeli flag, slaughtering people in the Gaza Strip. It's a symbol of Judaism, not just of the Jewish state.
They're misusing Judaism. They're screwing over Judaism but the Judaism should be totally separate from the state, and it should be a homeland for Jews, but not a Jewish state.
Yeah, this is very obvious where the problem is here, and I have a lot of appreciation to what you have just said, that state and religion should be separated, especially in the case of the Jewish state. However, the problem that we have, the problem that you probably face from time to time when you talk to Palestinians, is that we have a slight contradiction. The problem that we have with the Jewish state in Palestine is that Palestine is the land of the indigenous Palestinians. So as long as we maintain a Jewish state, and the Jewish state is unfortunately, it's again not a religious concept, is a racially driven expansionist state. As long as we have Jewish state in Palestine, this means that Palestinians are left to live in refugee camps in Gaza, in Lebanon, in the region. We have now 6 million refugees. Now, how we reconcile this idea of Jewish state with the fact of Palestinian being ethnically cleansed in 48 and still living in open air prison is a big issue, and this is probably the biggest difference between us. I am supporter of the concept of states of citizens. I mean, I believe that people in Palestine, Israel, should live as people in America and Britain. You're all citizens, regardless of your origin or your racial or racial background or ethnicity. And I also think that the Palestinian right of return is a crucial issue. In my book, I argue that actually Israel can reach peace in just 2 minutes. All it would take for Israeli Prime Minister to stand up and to say, I am now understanding the consequences of the 1948. We ethnically cleansed the Palestinian people. We took their land. We invite every Palestinian to come back, and we are going to live in brotherhood. For me, this would be the embodiment of the early Zionist concept. The early Zionist idea was to come back to live on the land. This would mean that Jews not only managed to come back to live on their alleged imaginary homeland, it would also mean that they, for the first time in their history, managed to live in peace and love and empathy, as you say, with the neighbors. One state, one democratic state that is based on the principle of state of its citizens.
You're listening to Flashpoints on Pacifica Radio. That's the voice of Gilad Atzmon. He's most recently the author of The Wandering Who. He is a world-class jazz saxophone player for sure. He'll take the top of your head off with his music. I saw him last night, and that was quite wonderful. Now, I want to throw this back to you, Michael. By the way, Michael Lerner is the author most recently of Embracing Israel, Palestine, and he's got a little announcement about a New York Times advertisement we're going to talk about before you get out of here, Michael. But let me just say this. My uncle, Dr. Leo Pfeffer, the late Dr. Leo Pfeffer, argued the key cases of separation of church and state before the Supreme Court in this country. He was always on arguing with William F. Buckley about this discussion. And this separation of church and state was crucial to this Orthodox Jew. How could you have the Jewish state and have separation of church and state? There's 1 million Arabs living there. How do you reconcile that?
Well, this is the Jews are not just a religion. They're an ethnic group. And right now, there are millions and millions of them living in the land of Israel. And I want to see everyone being given equal rights. And but Israel was set up in part as an affirmative action state for Jewish suffering. And the fact of the matter is that 1 out of every 3 Jews alive in 1940 was murdered by 1945. And the trauma of that experience, imagine what would happen in the United States. You saw what happened after 9/11. Imagine what would happen if instead of 3 to 4,000 people being killed on 9/11, there had been 100 million people killed. We would, first of all, we'd probably be in jail, all of us, accused of not being loyal enough, and there'd be fascism in this country. So there is an historic reason why the Jewish people needed and still feels that it needs, until anti-Semitism is gone from the planet, it needs a place, a safe haven for themselves. And so if it were up to me, I would rewrite the history. We wouldn't have had that, and we wouldn't have had a need for a Jewish safe place. But knowing the psychology of many Jews today, the post-traumatic stress disorder that affects Jews because of the Holocaust and of the 1700 years before the Holocaust, in which Christians were regularly trampling on our rights and killing us and raping and burning and throwing us out of their countries and so forth, the Jewish people have a legitimate claim for affirmative action. Now, should it have happened there? No, I would have. If it had been up to me, I would have asked them to give us California or at least Hawaii, rather than, if I had been deciding, I would have said affirmative action. Yeah, let's have the Big Island of Hawaii and a few of the other Hawaiian islands.
Well,
okay, but that's not what happened.
Who comes from Hawaii might not like that.
That's not what happened. Okay, so here we have a reality of a Jewish state there. Now look. You use these words about expansionist and imperialist and so forth and murderous, and it's all it's true of the current government of the state of Israel. It's also true of America. Now, I don't deny the right of us as Americans to continue to have an American state, even though it's built on the racism and genocide of Native Americans and then of African Americans. I don't deny our right, and I think it's a mistake for those of us who actually care, not about being right, but about actually ending the struggle and providing a way for Palestinians to get their own national self-determination.
Okay.
It's a mistake to go for a one-state solution when what we should be asking for is an interim solution that is 2 states, but a long-term solution that is no states, because I don't believe that in the 21st century it's possible for the people of the world to survive the environmental crisis that's facing us without eliminating
Michael, let me get
all
Gilad
states.
in, because we don't have a ton of time.
I think that some of the things that you are saying here must be addressed and in a strong voice. First, what you're saying here really is that the Palestinians should pay for crimes that were committed by Nazis, by Christians in Europe. This is not an ethical concept. It's something that cannot be justified. Jews suffered in Europe, and it is down to Europeans to sort the Jews who suffer so much. It is definitely not an issue to do with the Palestinians, who are totally innocent, who were completely innocent and still innocent in this crisis. Now, you are talking about 700 years of Jewish suffering. I understand that very well how painful it is to be a victim of racial hatred, but one of the concepts that I try to raise in my writing is that people who suffer so much should spend some time and try to understand why they suffer so much. I argue actually that rather than talking about Jews in terms of post-traumatic stress disorder, I actually believe that there is a strong element in Jewish culture of pre-traumatic stress disorder. Jews actually, that's the way I see it, culturally manage to bring on themselves quite a lot of problems. And we already spoke here about the arrogance and the intolerance that they perform against you, Dennis, against myself, and against many other they don't agree with. But now I want I'll make it very short. You mentioned the issue of 2 states versus 1 state. This is something that your listeners should know. Israel is, at the moment, 1 state. It has natural borders. It has 1 electric grid. It has 1 sewage system. It has 1 international pre-dial code. Israel is a 1 state, but it is dominated by Jewish ideology, by supremacist, expansionists, and so on.
Jewish? No.
Yes, Jewish. It is a Jewish state. It is a Jewish state. Not Judaic, Jewish state. Israel is controlled. It is definitely Jewish hegemony, and when there is a Israeli Arab parliament member like Azmi Bashara that come with the outrageous idea that people on the land should live in a democratic states of its citizens, he has to run away for his life. So what I'm saying, Israel is 1 state. There is no reason to divide this land on a racial ground. What we really want is to de-Zionize the state. We don't want to kick the Israelis from Israel. I never mention it. We don't want to throw them to the sea. All we need is a humanist shift of consciousness that would lead the 2 people to live together. Now, this is Palestinians always lived together with Jews. My family was living in the region and were protected by their Arab neighbors, by the Palestinian neighbors. It can be done. What we need is to lead the Jewish community toward this understanding of real brotherhood and empathy. Love your neighbor. This is the secret.
So let me. I don't have very much time, but I want to try a few things.
One more back and forth, please.
Okay. Number 1, you blame the victim here. You say that the Jews created this for themselves. Now, when some people say, oh, well, X or Y or Z is anti-Semitic, one of the bases for calling somebody anti-Semitic is when they use a different standard for the Jews than they use for anybody else. It turns out that most of us on the left have supported affirmative action, even in situations where the person who is being disadvantaged, for example, white male wanting to go to law school, is disadvantaged because of an affirmative action program that takes some of the places that might have been based simply on their score on the LSAT, on the law tests, and gives it to a woman or a person of color by virtue of the fact that that person, that a certain number of places have been allocated for people. And so that white male says, wait a second, I didn't do anything. I wasn't responsible for slavery. I wasn't, I didn't participate in that. So we say back, that's true. You didn't directly, but you're part of a larger culture that has done that. And in the case of the Arab world, the fact of the matter is that although the Arab world was much, much better to Jews than the Christian world, it was nevertheless true that Jews lived in conditions basically of apartheid. They had second-class citizenship. They did not have the same rights as Jews as Muslims did in most of the time that Jews lived there. So, in other words, the discrimination against Jews wasn't just Christian; it was global, and many of the people who are now the most right-wing anti-Arab in Israel are people who fled from Arab lands, and they report their own oppression. Now, you can say, well, wait, you don't accept that they were oppressed there, but I say always listen to the people who are oppressed to find out about their oppression.
Okay.
Don't take. Okay, but that's
we're running out of time. We're running out of time.
So let me say one
thing. Because you're going to have to leave it. I want Gilad to respond, and then I want to you to talk about the New York Times. Okay.
Yeah. I think that what we're doing here with this blaming the victim is something that I heard before. This is a kind of an argument that actually allow Jews to stop self-reflecting for hundreds of years. They always come to the conclusion that the Goyim, the Gentiles, are basically a bunch of murderers. I cannot accept it because, as it happens, for me, the Goyim, the Gentiles, are actually humanity. And it stops Jews for assimilating, and this is probably the problem that we see with the emancipation of Jews. We have to stop to blame Goyim. This is something that must be very clear. If we don't stop, if we don't step to blame Goyim, we have to find a pill that we give to Goyim that they stop killing Jews. I don't like
be equally compassionate to Jews. One minute. Compassionate towards Jews as you are towards Goyim.
1 minute. If Jews have the right to claim that their history is a chain of Holocaust and sufferings. So Jews should be brave enough to look into their culture and to try to understand. And by the way, I did it. One of the reasons that I am subject to so much harassment is I, in my book, try to understand why Jews suffer so much. By the way, I'm not the first one. Bernard Lazare did it in the turn of the 20th century, and there are some other texts. And by the way, even the Bible tried to understand it, to explain it. Now, the issue of discrimination in the Arab world, we have to be very accurate. It is very wrong to judge Quran from post-Enlightenment perspectives. Jews. It's not right to look at Jews as second-class citizens. In the Muslim world, they were actually protected, but they were not Muslims. So it's not exactly second-class. We can be blamed here of anachronism, historical anachronism. Now, the most interesting point that you raised about discrimination, about Arab Jews in Israel complaining or being the leading of anti-Arab feeling is actually very wrong reading. The Arab Jews in Israel are discriminated now for 60 years, and their antagonist reaction to Palestinians should be explained as their way to try to prove the white elite, European Zionists that they are as good in hating Arabs. It is not because they suffered in Arab world. And now in Israel, Arab Jews are admitting that they were living in very, very good condition, much better than in Israel.
Okay.
So what I want to get to now is there are differences between us. In my book, Embracing Israel-Palestine, I tell the story in such a way that you can understand the humanity of both sides, and I argue that if we are going to get to a resolution of this conflict, it will only come when people on each side are able to tell in a compassionate manner the story on the other side. But for me, that means not only compassion for Palestinians, it does, and that's why I am scorned by so many in the Jewish world, because I continually insist on the humanity and the equal right of the equal rights of Palestinians to Israelis and of Muslims to Jews to be seen as equally valuable. But also, we have to tell the story in a way that is compassionate to Israelis, to understand how they got in their place, because you cannot solve post-traumatic stress disorder unless you're able to sympathize with and help people understand their own suffering.
Okay,
now,
you spoke first,
yes,
so I've got to give a quick response to that, and then we're going to get to the New York Times, because each person gets the exact...
I totally agree with you. I totally agree with you that the way forward is compassion. However, once you say that Jews, we all have to look into the post-traumatic stress of the Jews, we are evading the post-traumatic state of the Palestinians.
No, I talk about that entirely. I totally agree with you about that.
Everything that you said here, compassion, understanding, brotherhood, is something that should be resolved in a one state, because it is a one state.
I'm not going to go there.
The only thing that it could be jeopardized in one state is the privilege of the Jews to live in Palestinian houses in Palestinian land. And this is something that ethically I cannot agree with.
All right, we're going to leave that part of this discussion. I'm going to ask you to stay, because I want you to play that saxophone.
We're not
going to talk politics, but please talk about this New York Times article.
Yes, we at Tikkun, and you can find this at www.tikkun.org/Iran. Tikkun.org/Iran. We are trying to collect money now for an ad in the New York Times whose highlight is this. It says, "No, Mr. Netanyahu, no, President Obama, no war in Iran, no first strike." Because we know that this coming week, Netanyahu and Obama and Santorum and several of the other candidates, Republican candidates, they're all going to be speaking at AIPAC, at the AIPAC convention. And Netanyahu and Obama are meeting. And there's a very good chance that Obama will be publicly saying, we're not for a war, but privately winking at Netanyahu and saying...
everything's on the table. That's the word.
And
so again, how do people become part of this ad?
It's a strong statement saying, we, the American people, do not support this. And you can find it by going to tikkun.org, tikkun.org/Iran. You can read the statement there, you can sign it, and hopefully donate enough money so that we can put this in the Times, because the pressure on Obama from the Republicans, from Democrats who give blind support to Israel, from AIPAC, from the Christian right, which is much more significant even than AIPAC, is huge. We need to stand up now before we're dragged into another war.
The website again?
www.tikkun.org.
Rabbi Michael Lerner. Brand new book.
This goes as well.
Brand new book, Embracing Israel-Palestine. You should check it out. Michael is the founder of Tikkun. He's got to run out of here because he's heading to San Francisco
to talk at the Phoenix bookstore tonight.
All right, and maybe I'll join you for a reading soon. Take care.
Thank you so much for having me.
Bye-bye. Thank you, Michael, for coming in at the last minute.
Thanks.
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
Really appreciate it. Be careful. All right. You're listening to Flashpoints on Pacifica Radio. My name is Dennis Bernstein. We're changing the moment here we're going to take a few minutes and give it to extraordinary music, and maybe I can even, I don't know if you were tuned in this morning, but maybe I can read a poem or two along with this extraordinary jazz saxophone player. But I'd like you to just blow it for a while. Could you?
All right.
Because this guy can play. I want to read a poem along with this extraordinary jazz player, a poem or two. We never have a chance. I got a new book of poems out. I want to share this with you and have this beautiful saxophone player jam. And let's call this Where the Music Begins.
Good.
Richard hates math, but he counts on keeping time. He counts on keeping time. Today he found a stethoscope behind the hospital and brought it to school for show and tell. He put it up to his ears and against his chest and began to snap the fingers to the beat of his own heart. And this he told me, he said, "Hey, Teach, this is where the music begins." Hey, Teach, you get it? This is where the music begins. Richard hates math, but he's a master of mouth noise. He can click and clack and pop and whistle. He's mastered pitch and attack with the skill of a seasoned jazz man. He's a one-boy band. A one-boy band. Plays a dozen different instruments between his lips and his hands. Late night, Richard sips deeply from Pop's vinyl. Coltrane, Mingus, Lady Day, and Miles. His father chants these names as he falls asleep, blue notes mingling with thunder and sirens. Beautiful. Well, that's Gilad Atzmon, the jazz saxophone player. He's the author of The Wandering Who. You might want to check that out. That's what he was just sort of having a little dialogue with Rabbi Michael Lerner. We, again, appreciate the rabbi coming in. Gilad Atzmon, you are welcome to come back. Open door policy for you to come back and share music, share your thinking, your courageous words, and we do appreciate you for being with us on Flashpoints.
It was a great time to spend some time with you in the radio today and yesterday, 2 days ago, in the Islamic Cultural Center. It is wonderful what you're doing in this radio. Thank you so much.
I've been plastered with posters saying, you're a Nazi, you're a self-hating Jew, and it's not just me and it's not just Gilad Atzmon. This is a discourse that pervades a large section of the Jewish world in which anybody who raises significant questions about Israel gets abused. And unfortunately, I believe that has had the consequence of pushing away many younger Jews who are thinking to themselves, well, if they're telling me I'm not a good Jew because I have ethical questions about Israeli policy, then maybe I'm not a good Jew. And I'm here as a rabbi to say, not true. That in fact, the best of the Jewish tradition leads us to challenge established power. And the prophets did this in the Bible. They were always saying,
Oakland, because the art center run by the city of Oakland, somehow there were all kinds of strange things that happened in last minute, bureaucracies. It all seemed pretty simple to me that somebody was sent a check and, maybe it ended up here and got to someplace else a week later. I don't really know. But apparently, they did not, the Alice Art Center and the Oakland City did not apparently want to go ahead with this. We did have this beautiful interview at the Islamic Cultural Center. But I have to say that in planning to interview Gilad Atzmon, I have gotten more hate mail, more attacks. I've been called a self-hating Jew hater. I've been called pro. And you're listening to Flashpoints on Pacifica Radio. My name is Bernstein. Gilad Atzmon is my guest here, along with Rabbi Michael Lerner. I'm really delighted that you both could join us today.
Pleasure.
And Gilad Atzmon is the author, most recently, of The Wandering Who. Michael Lerner has just published Embracing Israel-Palestine, a Strategy to Heal and Transform the Middle East. And I appreciate, Michael, that you came in at the last minute. Sure. I dragged you in here and made sure that you join us. Let me start this way. I interviewed Gilad on Saturday night at the Cultural Center in I said it wrong. It's the Islamic Cultural Center in
that the government of the state was screwed up. They were challenging the priests. They were challenging the religion. So I'm not here to say this is kosher, this is not kosher. I think that we should engage in the ideas, struggle with the ideas, and where people think that they disagree with ideas, then disagree with them. But don't put down the people. Don't make the people into evil people who disagree with you. And I think that the left does this also, by the way, for a lot of people on the right. They don't listen to and respect people on the right. And I think we've got to stop that. We've got to be able to say, we disagree with this person. We even think that the policies they're pursuing are criminal and should be put into jail. But the person isn't fundamentally evil. The person still has a redeeming part to them. So,
a Nazi, a Holocaust denier, as was my guest, Gilad Atzmon. And I think actually you two know each other. Michael, you've been in, you're familiar with the kind of writing that Gilad does. Why do you think I got that kind of attack? Why do you think people are saying those things? Do you think I'm a Jew hater?
Look, I'm not here to give anybody a hechsher, say this one is kosher and that one isn't kosher. I think that the whole discourse of who is kosher and who isn't kosher, or who is okay and isn't okay, is a shanda, is a disgrace. And we need to listen to people, listen to their arguments, listen to their worldviews, and then when we disagree. But I myself have been faced with the same kinds of charges. I've had 4 times in the last year and a half, my house has been physically attacked.